What a bless to be with a great investigative journalist today. Thank you for your time, Stefania Maurizi.
Thanks to you for your interest.
That's great that we can finally make it. There's so much to discuss, and I said great journalist, and I mean it actually, because I have a little bit of ambivalence with journalism, because I think this domain or this work is to be noble, one of the most noble work to do. But when you look the reality, you see that it's far from being what you think it is. And people, journalists in general, are mainly repeating the state's propaganda or something else. And I would say the litmus test for me is when I see a journalist that worked to defend his own profession and to defend the persecution of Julian Assange. And in that regard, you've been working very hard for a very long time. So to me, it shows something that you have integrity and you understand actually what journalism is. And then maybe we can start and you tell me, what is your perception of journalism?
So thank you for this. My perception of journalism is one that, I was pretty upset working on the WikiLeaks case, working on the documents actually, because my work started because I was interested in these secret documents about the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq. And I got in touch with WikiLeaks well before they published the Afghan war logs, even the collateral murder, which was basically the revelation which made WikiLeaks famous all around the world. I had started looking at WikiLeaks in 2008. And the reason why I was looking at WikiLeaks, which at that time was pretty, unknown to the mainstream media and people. And the reason was that one of my sources one of my sources in Italy had stopped talking to me. She was convinced she was under illegal interception. Of course, there is no way to know whether you are under illegal interception. You don't know, it might be a paranoia or it might be true. So what happened was that my source didn't want to talk to me anymore. She stopped any contact. So it was at that point, back in 2008, that I realized I needed a better source protection, because the old techniques, the old-fashioned techniques didn't work anymore in these days where surveillance is widespread. So I'm a mathematician. Before journalism, I studied math. I got a degree in mathematics. I studied a little of cryptography. I had just a theoretical knowledge. I just understood the concepts. I had no basic training in cryptography, but I understood the concept because I had studied the concept of cryptography. So there was just one media organization in the world using cryptography in those days. And that organization was WikiLeaks. It had been established just 1.5 years before, in 2006, in October 2006. And so I wanted to learn from them, because no one else was using cryptography, not even the New York Times, not even the Washington Post, not even the biggest newsroom, CNN, no one. They were pioneers. They were visionaries. They were using this cryptography. So I told myself, I want to learn from these guys. I want to understand how they do it, because I think they are doing something new, something potentially very important, because source protection, I'm not sure if you understand how crucial it is, source protection. Source protection is crucial. Unless we are able to provide our sources the better source protection, unless they are confident that they are not, listen, they cannot,
Tracked.
people cannot understand that they have the sources behind our work. They stop talking to us unless they are this confident. So back in 2008, I started looking at their work very closely. I started the first contacts early in 2009. And during the summer of 2009, they called me in the middle of the night. And I was sleeping. It was very, it was very hot summer in Italy, end of July 2009. And they said, "We are WikiLeaks." And they said, "What's that?" I mean, I couldn't even understand what was going on.
Believe it.
And so they said, "We have something we would like to ask you for help in the verification process." They had the document in Italian, so they wanted to some help to verify this document. And we cooperated, and they said, you should go to your computer immediately. You have an hour. After an hour, we will remove it because we risk that someone can intercept it, can just access this file. So we work on this document. It was a very interesting document, by the way. And at that point, I realized that their journalism was of real interest to me. Because it was very interesting? Because they were pioneering a completely new, different journalism. And I wanted this kind of journalism because I didn't want the kind of journalism we have had after the 9/11, with the New York Times, for example, refusing to call torture. They were called enhanced interrogations, or with the Washington Post refusing publishing the names of the East European countries where the CIA had black sites, the so-called black sites, which were, secret prisons. And the Washington Post had not published the names of these countries, like Romania and like Poland, because the US government, the Bush administration, had asked them not to publish it. So for me, the new journalism by WikiLeaks, which was an organization we had told the Pentagon no. When they had published the Guantanamo Manual, the Pentagon had asked them to remove these documents from their website because the publication was not authorized, So they didn't remove. They said no to the Pentagon. And for me, it was, some fresh air. I told myself, I want to know these people. I want to understand their journalism. I want to cooperate and work as a journalist on this. That's why I got very interested in this case.
Yeah, when you were working, you said we were working with WikiLeaks. Were you working as independent, or were you working at this time for like Italian journal?
I was working for one of the best Italian news. It was the leading Italian news magazine, L'Espresso. At that time, was one of the best investigative outlets in Italy. Now it's a really different situation, but at that time it was really good. So I was working on the case and on the document as a journalist, as an investigative journalist working for L'Espresso, for this leading Italian magazine.
Okay, and this time you could do what they were requested. They requested you to do. And do you think today it has an impact on the global media? Because I've heard that now a lot of journal, newspaper, and other medias they have this safe, encrypted way to communicate with them.
Of course, they had this, and it took years before they introduced this kind of cryptographic protection and tech protection for sources. So you realize how ahead WikiLeaks was.
Yeah.
They had introduced this in 2006, so very well before the New York Times or the Guardian Guardian or other newspapers. So they were pioneers, they were visionaries, and now their techniques and solutions are being copied by prominent newsroom all around the world. So they were really ahead. However, what I want to stress is that WikiLeaks is not just a platform, it's a media organization. So for example, when they sent one of the journalists at that time Sarah Harrison was working as a WikiLeaks journalist. When they sent Sarah Harrison to Hong Kong to help Edward Snowden to seek asylum, they did not send a platform. They did send a journalist, So WikiLeaks is not just a platform. People who don't understand this and think, look, anyone can build WikiLeaks, because anyone can adopt a platform for these anonymous submissions. Well, of course, anyone can adopt it. But first of all, WikiLeaks is not a platform, it's a media organization. And, I have worked as a journalist for the last 20 years, and I have seen very, very few media organizations which have the courage to, to say no to the Pentagon, to tell no to the Pentagon, and to help Edward Snowden. If you consider Edward Snowden was in Hong Kong and he was completely abandoned, and prominent news organizations were publishing these documents like The Guardian or The Washington Post, but none of them helped Edward Snowden. He took WikiLeaks. So WikiLeaks is much, much more than a platform.
And somehow the other media now that have copied that, they never gave the gratitude back to WikiLeaks, quite the opposite actually, like if they were jealous or of something. But when you see the cover, how they cover the persecution of Julian, you're like, but do you understand what? It's hard to say if there's really an unwillingness to cover because it's like disturbing to them, or if it's sheer incompetence. Sometimes I don't know. It's probably a little bit of both. They don't really understand the extent of the gravity of the situation, for one. And as you said, WikiLeaks was pioneer well in advance. Maybe they're still very far behind in understanding the world and everything. So what's your take on that?
I believe they understand how serious the situation is. So I don't believe the problem is that they don't get how serious, how tragic his situation. I believe they are aware, but they don't want to touch it. The US government is a major player. They decide many careers. They have, their influence is perceived all around the world. So I believe that they don't want to touch it. And they have concern that they are the next after Julian Assange, So they probably realize that it's better not to touch this. It's better not to, irritate the United States, which is a superpower, So I believe it's purely political. It's not that they don't get the importance of this case. They do, of course, they do. However, I have to say that in these days, after a decade of this demonization campaign, now all, major media, journalistic organization like the International Federation of Journalists, Reporters Without Borders, and so on, are appealing are just campaigning in order to have, media pressure and in order to have a campaign to free Julian Assange.
And you've covered all the leaks, and there were many, millions, like maybe more than any other organization. And I think you're one who worked in depth of all that subject. You just wrote a book, I think, The Secret Power, I think. But I don't think it's neither in English not in French yet, or is it?
Not yet. I plan an English edition by 2022, and let's hope for a French edition as well. But for now, I think it is very well received, because people, if you look at the full picture behind all this demonization campaign, you understand how absurd, how, you know, here you have a superpower who caused the death of millions of people, caused millions of refugees, and they are putting in prison a journalist who never caused a single death, you know? Mm-hmm. So it's like kind of Kafka, you know, Kafka.
Yeah.
It's kind of Kafkaesque situation, you know, where the war criminals are putting in prison innocent men exposing their crimes.
Absolutely.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to tell the audience, bear with us, because I'm a French speaker and Stefania is an Italian speaker. So, but I'm sure if you keep tuned, you will learn a lot. So can you drive a little bit in your book in English? What are the substance, the subject, and maybe we just discussed how WikiLeaks changed the game in structural information, how to structure and report information. But then can you talk a little bit of what information WikiLeaks brought to the world? And I think every day that passes vindicates Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, because we've seen recently with the Afghan war that we were lied for 20 years. And all the media are very surprised, because, you know, Pentagon has said that the Afghan army was strong and could resist, and they were well equipped and well trained and everything. Bullshit. And then within like 10 days, there were not even a single shot fired. So you're like, yeah, but if you look deeper, WikiLeaks have been telling you that.
Of course.
With many other things. So can you tell us what WikiLeaks revealed in these different leaks that you covered during the years?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we have to start with the most crucial publication they have and revelation they have published, which is basically the US government, US documents, the Afghan war logs, Iraq, of course, collateral murder.
Yeah, we
video.
covered that with Nils Melzer.
Yeah, the documents, Afghan war logs, Iraq war logs, the US diplomacy cables, and the Guantanamo files. So these are crucial documents. And the reason why Julian Assange is in prison is because of these documents. And the reason why he has been charged with alleged Espionage Act violations are these documents, not other documents, these specific documents. So if you look at these documents, if you look at the Afghan war logs, which were 76,000 documents, then they had 15,000 Afghan war logs, which they never published because these documents contain many names of informants, translators, and people who had helped the US and coalition forces. So there were names, and they decided to put these documents aside in order to avoid any problem to these people. So if you look at these documents, you realize how absurd the Afghan war was, even at that time, 10 years ago, you know, because if you look, for example, how little the US and the Western coalition troops had achieved with with the Afghan police, the Afghan forces, they were obtaining, after 10 years, they have got absolutely nothing. So, they were spending a lot of money, they were risking lives, they were killing civilians. You have to realize that in the last 10 years in Afghanistan, something like 3,000 innocent civilians were killed, both from the US and coalition troops, and also from the Taliban and terrorists like ISIS and so on. So I mean,
mostly civilians, though, no? Mostly Afghan civilians.
3,000 civilians each year, which means a 9/11 each year in the last 10 years.
Yesterday they killed 10, a family of 10.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at these documents, you realize how little they had achieved after 10 years. I mean, the documents were from 2004 to 2009, which means 6 years, you know, secret reports on what was happening on the war theater. And there was no progress, basically. And which we have seen what happened. Now we realize what a disaster it has been, this war. But if you look at the Iraq war log, the disaster was already there. The nonsense was already there, you know. And in addition to this, you had this nonsense. You had this secret units, for example, like the Task Force 373, which was unknown. It was completely secret, never heard before of this secret unit. And they had no idea who were they killing. In the middle of the night, they were killing people. They had no idea whatsoever who they were killing. So the local population was furious, was hating them because they were killing nonsense. They were killing civilians and they thought that they were terrorists when in fact they were civilians. So this war had been a nonsense from the very beginning, to be honest. And the Afghan war logs, you know, provide evidence for this, factual evidence of this.
You say no progress, but it depends for who, because when you look the end game, you see that more than $2 trillion has been spent, 95% on the military industrial complex and all these goons that makes money out of wars and stuff. So, you know, it's not like a defeat for everybody. A lot of people got very rich in that story.
Absolutely. And that's the reason why, you know, that's the reason why they want to destroy Julian Assange WikiLeaks. It is because they, you know, they allowed the public, the journalists and the public to you know, to look at the reality of this war in real time, not 10, 30 years after, you know, when the documents could have been declassified by the US government, but as the war was happening, you know. So that's why they want to destroy him. They want to destroy him because he provided an opportunity for the public opinion to look at the war as it is, not as the propaganda machine was telling people it was, you know?
Yeah. And independent journalists understood that, and they picked up Julian's material and they tried to explain. That's why I'm a little bit aware also, like you, I've been following that for these last, I would say, 15 years. And I think I'm really, really grateful to all these people who understood the game that we were played at there. And so many, I would say probably millions of people are aware, because you were saying that some journalists are afraid to be the next Julian Assange, basically. But I would say they should also be afraid not to be, because what credibility is still there for them when you see that they report how Navalny is like political prisoners, and it's horrible. The entire European Union should do something and sanction Russia and everything. And the guy is giving like lecture online from his prison, and Julian Assange is like locked down for 23 hours a day without being able to speak to anyone. And the people who, even the NGO who wants to attend is the court, is in the tribunal, they cannot. How can you be credible when you have such a double standards? And the journalists, they should understand that nobody will listen to them at the end of the day. So they will lose their job anyway if they don't do it properly. And I think when you see the media crisis, you see it's not in the future. It happened already. People are not trusting the media anymore.
Yeah, that's a serious problem. Let me be very clear. The problem is not that we have press reports on Navalny. I mean, whatever I think about Navalny, it's, I defend his right to do politics and be safe and be, because I'm a Democrat. I believe in democracy. So whatever I think about his ideas and political programs or whatever, I defend his right to do politics and to be safe. Yep. So the problem is not that there are press reports on Navalny. The problem is that there are no press reports on Julian Assange and other prisoners of conscience and other dissidents. And the reason why there are so many press reports on Navalny is because the human rights have been used politically as a weapon to demonize Russia and China and other countries. And at the same time, you have a journalist who revealed war crime, who has never known freedom again, and there is no press coverage, and no one is looking for the documents, for example. It took an Italian journalist to try to get access to the documents. I believe it's a scandal that no one had tried to get the documentation about the case. I mean, hundreds reported on this case, but no one tried to get the access to the documentation. So the crisis of our journalism is serious because, there is this double standard, as you said. Hundreds of press reports on the official enemies and China, Russia, but no press reports about the serious, extremely serious violation in our democracy. And the Julian Assange case is one of the most serious, because you cannot have a journalist who revealed war crime, who never known freedom again. This is not what democracy is supposed to be. If you are in a regime, you expect this kind of things, in a dictatorship, you expect this kind of things. But in a democracy, you expect that if you are a journalist and reveal war crime, you are safe, you are free, and you can do it. You can expose the state criminality at the highest level, and you can be free. This is what you expect from a democracy. But the Julian Assange case tells us a different story. So it forces us to look at our reality, which is very different from what we think. It's not safe at all, and he's the proof. He's the evidence. He's not free at all. He has never known freedom again. So the press doesn't want to look at this. The media don't want to look at this. They are happy to promote the idea that we are democracy, these are the bad guys, and they promote this narrative.
But many people call them out. In Switzerland, we have small media, quite useless when you talk about the foreign policy. But like when the report of studying the Icelandic newspaper reported that the main witness for in the Julian Assange case in his indictment lied, and told that he was basically paid by US to bullshit, and then the case doesn't hold anymore. Even Snowden said that's it, that's the end of the case. He tweeted that, but then no one picked it up. So basically no one knows why Julian Assange is in jail, but in fact everyone knows, as you said earlier, is because he's been truthful.
Well, actually, maybe it's important to explain this case to the public, to the listeners. Basically, the US is used a witness who is, kind of problematic person, I would say, at least. This person was a volunteer who basically worked for a few months for WikiLeaks back in 2010, 2011. And he became an informant. He became an informant for the FBI. He is an Icelandic national. So the FBI went to Iceland, and Icelandic authority initially thought it was a cooperation, a kind of legal cooperation in order to investigate hackers attacking Iceland. But they realized that it was not. It was the FBI trying to investigate on WikiLeaks without any formal request, formal procedure. And so the Icelandic authorities stopped any collaboration, which is pretty interesting because, I have known police forces due to my profession, and they tend to believe that the FBI is a kind of aristocracy of police law enforcement. So it's very common. They are very eager. They are very happy to cooperate with the FBI. But in this case, the Icelandic authorities were very, very smart and very ethical in refusing to cooperate with these murky activities, infiltration activities against WikiLeaks. So they used this witness, Siggy, and I would say we have no evidence that they paid for his testimony. They are, according to what we know, according to what is public, they paid for his time, the time he lost. And they paid $5,000. So it was not a payment for his testimony. However, this person has now told to the Icelandic media Stundin that he lied to the FBI. So now it's collapsing. So these people who was already problematic because he had been, he had been diagnosed as a sociopath. He had been in a criminal case for abusing children. He had been in a criminal case for stealing money to WikiLeaks, donations from WikiLeaks. It was already problematic, and now it's even more problematic because he said that he lied to the FBI. So now the whole case seems very, very precarious. Probably it's very likely he will, at least this testimony will collapse, but there is no coverage about it, no coverage at all. So let's see what happens in the next months, because this is a crucial witness for the US. So it's a kind of absolutely important witness for them.
Mm-hmm. Can you maybe tell us what it could change in the ongoing case? Because recently there was the appeal, because Julian had won the case in the beginning of the year because the judge Baritza refused to send him to USA because she thought there was some possibility of health issue, and also that he could maybe suicide himself or something like that. Mm-hmm. And then the US appealed, and they surprisingly, but not really surprisingly, won again. So the case is dragging now. Can you take us along the process? Because to me, the UK law process is very murky as well, and it seems everything is organized, so it drags the longest, and they hope maybe that it will just die in there. I feel that's the strategy, to be honest.
Well, I think you're right. The strategy is, to make him, to keep him in prison, in a high security prison, strict in a strict regime with as less human social interactions as possible, so that he is physically and mentally collapsed. You know, this is this is what they are trying to do. But from the very beginning, even when he was inside the embassy, they have, all the UK authorities have always denied him any safeguard, any chance to get a safe passage and to leave the embassy and to to enjoy his asylum, which is a human rights, you know. So they have always denied any chance to go to the hospital to get proper medical treatment. So there's a strategy here, and the strategy here is either he commits suicide because he mentally collapsed, or you know, he loses his mind. He just became you know, so depressed beyond any chance of being functioning.
That is called torture. Eh?
Yes.
Even Niels Melzer, the special reporter for UN, said it very clearly.
Absolutely.
It's a torture method.
I mean, yes. I mean, I'm not a doctor. I'm not an expert on torture, but there are experts, and the expert is the UN special expert, special rapporteur on torture, Ms. Melzer, who visited Julian Assange in prison with two experts, with two medical experts. So it's not my opinion, you know.
No.
It's something which medical experts have, you know, have discovered, you know, have assessed. So they want him completely out of business, completely destroyed. And one of the methods is to have this process, this extradition process going ahead for years and years and years while he remains inside the prison, which is a complete abuse because he's an innocent person. Why? He doesn't belong to a high security prison. Why he should stay inside the...
And he won this case. So basically, if you won your case and there's an appeal, then at least you won. So you are not still in, but they're keeping him.
Absolutely. And there is nothing we can do. We report on it, the media report on it, and nothing happened. That's the real, you know, the real frustrating aspect of the case.
But then, does it mean that the UK law is politicized then? Or it is?
It is, absolutely.
But to what extent, to what level? Because at the low level, that is clear to me. Breitze was totally corrupt for the USA. And then the appeal, I would think there are some responsible people thinking, because as Niels Melzer said, as soon as you really interest yourself to the case, in 5 minutes, you discover that there's like, it's smelling everywhere at every corner. So like a well-functioning person to me will directly stop it. So as long as they don't stop it, I consider them all corrupt, but maybe I'm a bit too angry about it.
Well, I mean, they have been able to, we have seen, for example, what happened with the Swedish case. They have kept him under investigation for 9 years without any progress when they could have just traveled to London, question him and put him under, and charge him and put him under trial if they really had evidence. They didn't. They absolutely didn't do that, you know? And here you understand how corrupt is the full justice system, because, you know, it was not only the Swedish authorities which didn't go to London. It was also the Crown Prosecution Service, which told the Swedish prosecutor, don't question.
Don't chicken up or something like that. Don't get goose. I don't know.
Yes, they in one of their emails said when there was a the press was suggesting that the Swedish prosecutors were dropping the case.
Because they were nothing.
The UK authorities wrote them, don't you get
cold feet, yeah.
You know, but there is this document which was unearthed by my FOIA litigation, which explicitly provide evidence that it was the Crown Prosecution Service, the UK authorities, telling the Swedish prosecutors, don't question him in London. So they created this legal and diplomatic mess, quagmire, I call it, which has kept Julian Assange basically under continuous investigation, under continuous detention, the arbitrary detention since 2010, you know, when they could have immediately solved it. They could have just questioned him in London, charge him if they have evidence, and put him under trial if they had the evidence. So why they didn't do that? Even the third, they closed and opened and closed the Swedish investigation 3 times. 3 times. So they opened the 20 August 2010, and the first prosecutor immediately closed it after 5 days. 5 days. So it means that it was pretty evident, pretty clear that there was no rape at all, you know? They reopened it. They reopened it the 1st of September 2010. And since the 1st of September 2010, they kept it under preliminary stage for 7 years. You know, I never heard, you know, we journalists work on crime cases. I have never seen an investigation like this, never. And then they close it they close it the 19th May 2017. And then when he was arrested in May 2019, they reopened it. So at that point, they could have questioned him. They could have charged him. They could have extradited him. They didn't, you know? So it's complete nonsense. Unless you believe these people are idiots, I don't believe they are idiots. Unless you believe they are completely, you know, idiots, there must be something wrong, because you don't manage an investigation this way.
To say the
least. And no one had any justice, neither the 2 women, neither Julian Assange, you know?
Yeah, to say the least. In a normal case, would such an email that you describe with the cold feet be enough by itself to disrupt the entire process and make it completely out?
I think there are many knives, but none of them work. That's what.
I was naive to believe that actually the law had, you know, some like process to follow, but it seems like you do as you wish when you wish. So that's also, I think, one of the great revelation of the Assange case, that the structure of protection that we may think law is a structure of protection because, you know, we're judged, we think what is against, what is for, and we think. You would think that that is a protection against the powerful, the politician, and other stuff, but it's not the case. So it's very interesting to see and to witness that we are not in this world we think we are. And this is a huge gift from him too, I think. But he has to pay for his life. That's the problem. That's why everyone should be standing and fight for him. Everybody.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the justice system, it's completely broken. It hasn't protected him, neither the Swedish nor the British. I mean,
and if they don't, then what system does?
Exactly.
Does my system do it? I'm not sure now anymore.
No, I believe there is just one shield for him. And the shield is the public opinion, the public pressure. And that's why we have seen this demonization campaign. The demonization campaign had as a target Julian Assange, because they they wanted, the UK authorities, the US authorities, the Swedish authorities wanted to destroy his reputation, because so that there was no public support, no empathy, public empathy.
It worked at the beginning. It worked, yeah.
It worked. Now things are changing, because people realize how horrific his treatment. People realize that he was right from the very beginning.
On everything. Like
the US was after him from the very beginning, and it was after him for publishing their dirty secrets about war crimes and, you know, torture and so on. So it was right from the very beginning. Now people understand he was very right from the very beginning, and so now it's changing, you know.
So what is the next steps of the process? Because I have this fear that the US and the UK were successful to switch the narrative into the he's going to kill himself, or no, he's not going to kill himself. And now the subject is not, is he guilty? Because apparently he is of every charge according to fucking Barretzer. Sorry. So are they going to be able to go back to actually what matter? And that is the subject of, that is a political prisoner that is persecuted because he gave a service to citizen of the world? Or are we going to stay on that specific health problem?
Well, I think, you know, what is really bad about this case is that Vanessa Barretzer, the judge Barretzer, completely dismiss any public interest, any press freedom concern, anything. And she reduced the whole case. She reduced her rejection of the extradition to the US based on his health conditions.
Yep.
So everything else, the importance of these revelations, the importance of what of his journalism, and all other matters or crucial matters have been dismissed. And this is devastating. This is devastating because this case is about the freedom of the press to expose state criminality at the highest levels. This is what the case is about. So you cannot dismiss this aspect, this crucial matter, because the whole case is about revealing, you know, the darkest corners of our government, revealing the darkest corners of the US government and the war on terror. So it's absurd that this matter have been completely dismissed by the judge. And this is of serious concern. Is
the defense going to be able to come back to that in the appeal, or the appeal will only be the part of the health?
We hope the defense will cross appeal. It's called cross appeal, an appeal where the defense bring these important matters like press freedom, the importance of revealing war crimes, the crucial revelations on torture and so on. We hope the defense will be able to cross appeal, which means bringing back these important matters before the court. Let's hope, you know. But what is of concern is also the fact that the US achieved an important result for them, for their victory, and they got basically the latest appeal in August before the High Court. The US was able to have the health assessment by an important psychiatrist, Professor Koppelman, to be put in question. So the US argued, this is exaggerated. This is his health conditions are much better. his health conditions are not as serious as Professor Koppelman sustained. So the United States won from this point of view. And this is a serious concern because they are trying to bypass the reason why the Judge Bereitzer rejected the extradition to the US.
So the next part will be in November or?
October, end of October, 27 and 28 October. But you know, they are going around the health conditions because the extradition was denied by Judge Bereitzer based on his health and mental conditions. So they are trying ways around this problem. They have tried to give guarantees and say, we won't put it in extreme isolation. We won't put in ADX Florence, the most extreme prison in the US. But these guarantees, as Amnesty said, are not reliable at all.
Not only that, but I think they say also that if something change or there's a new fact or something, anything, they could change.
Exactly.
They could change it. So and we'd see that the voice of America is zero in credibility anyway. So why would anyone believe that?
I mean, this is why they are not reliable, because they say we reserve ourselves to not to put in we won't put in ADX Florence. We won't put under this extreme isolation regime called SAMS measures, the special administrative measures. However, we reserve ourselves the right to put in ADX and under SAM, which is why you cannot believe them. You cannot take seriously because these are not guarantees, as Amnesty said, you know?
Yeah, the arrogance has no limits, eh? So, what do you suggest the population of the media, or the people concerned, do to help? As a citizen like me with like no reach, no power, nothing, and also the media, what do you think is the best strategic way to help?
I mean, I would say the old motto, agitate, educate, organize, you know? I believe it's still really relevant, you know, educate, because there has been so much disinformation on this case, which people can barely get the facts about this case. So the first thing is to educate, to try to understand what is true about this case. Then is organize, try to organize protests, kind of pressure on authorities, national authorities, getting motions, petitions on this case, and protests, and so agitate. You know, I believe this is all we can do, and it works. I believe it works. We know that in this case, only public pressure works.
Yeah.
Because the justice system will not work. We cannot trust it. We have seen what they have done in the last 11 years. They have done a complete disaster. They have kept him arbitrarily detained, and no tribunals, no court, neither in Sweden, not in the UK, was able to, you know, to do anything for him. Quite the opposite. They were the part of the problems because they were insisting on extradition. They were insisting on arbitrary detention. So we cannot trust the justice system.
So you're in the press industry. What would you say people can do to put pressure on the media? Because I think that's also a way to mount the pressure on the politics and the law, if the media are forced to, by public pressure, to do something, to report about it.
I believe that writing emails asking to cover the case and to get, you know, regular updates about the case, and to have investigations, and to run, you know, to broadcast investigation on the case would really help. So putting pressure on the media will work, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, maybe 10 media, out of 10 media, just 3 are receptive and will cooperate, or maybe 2 or maybe 1, but it's better than nothing, you know? Because the problem is that there is a lot of silence around this case.
That's the main problem.
And you have to challenge them because they believe that due to this disinformation and demonization, they should be informed that some of the biggest media organizations are asking for is liberation, like Reporters Without Borders, like, you know, the International Federation of Journalists and stars like Ken Loach. So it's not alone. They want to represent it. They want to depict him as isolated, as alone, abandoned by these major personalities. It's not true. I mean, Ken Loach was available to write an intro to my book about the case and about WikiLeaks, and he's still fully supportive of Julian Assange, you know? So it's not true that he had been abandoned,
no.
You know? Quite the opposite.
By the people with integrity.
Yeah.
But we can see what happened to these people, mainly like the Labour Party. Let's go in UK a little bit, because really it's like at one point I was hoping for Jeremy Corbyn to be leader, but I was without counting the opposition of Keir Starmer and the rights of the Labour Party, who spent more energy killing the chance of Jeremy Corbyn than to actually oppose the right-wing crazy nuts government. And Ken Loach was Labour for a long time and is expelled. So I may believe that the excuse they use is false anti-Semitism, but it's probably also linked to the defense of Julian Assange, because when you think about the email you were talking about, Keir Starmer was the head of the, but tell me if I'm saying something wrong. Keir Starmer wasn't in charge of the prosecution service at the time where the email you were talking about was sent to the Swedish?
Yeah, Keir Starmer was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service.
Yeah, and now he's the chief of the Labour Party, the leader of the Labour Party.
Now
a failed
it's
leader.
really important to understand, to explain this to the listener. Otherwise, it gets confusing.
Okay.
So basically, the most crucial decisions about the Julian Assange case were taken by the Crown Prosecution Service, which is this United Kingdom agency in charge of prosecution in England and Gales. So they took their decision between 2010 and 2013 about the fact that the Swedish prosecutor should not go to London to question him. And they were telling the Swedish, don't come here, question him only after extraditing him in Sweden. And Julian Assange was opposing extradition to Sweden because he was convinced that once extradited to Sweden, he could be easily extradited to the US. So he was not opposing. He was not opposing being questioned. Quite the opposite. He was available from the very beginning. He had been questioned back in 2010. He had been available since 2010 to be questioned, but the Swedish prosecutor didn't want to question him. They only wanted to extradite him to Sweden in order just to question him. So basically, when this decision about the case were taken, Keir Starmer, who is the current leader of Labour, who has defeated, who basically succeeded Jeremy Corbyn, Keir Starmer was heading the Crown Prosecution Service, this agency which contributed to create this legal and diplomatic quagmire for Julian Assange. However, at the same time, it's important to stress that there are no emails about any direct involvement of Keir Starmer. So there is not an email of Keir Starmer telling the Swedish prosecutor something. It's the whole case had been managed by a lawyer called Paul Close at the Crown Prosecution Service. And the mystery is, the highly suspicious thing is that the Crown Prosecution Service destroyed many key emails of this lawyer. And I discovered this thanks to my FOIA litigation back in 2017. And since then, I'm still fighting to discover what they destroyed, why, how, because they have destroyed crucial documentation about a case which was still ongoing and highly controversial. This is a highly unusual, highly suspicious, I would say, you know? And don't forget, this Crown Prosecution Service is the very same agency in charge of the extradition to the US. So the US government is acting through the Crown Prosecution Service because they cannot act directly in the UK. The US authorities manage the extradition process, the extradition proceedings, it's called, through the Crown Prosecution Service. So the Crown Prosecution Service is the UK agency in charge initially of the extradition attempt to Sweden, and now to the extradition attempt to the US.
Can you explain what is the FOIA request? I don't have, I don't know really what that is.
So a FOIA request is an ordinary tool for everyone, for every citizen, not just a journalist, for everyone to request the documentation to a government. And this documentation has to be about, you know, how the state functions, how Department of Justice works, how health system work, how the government takes the decision, and so on. You cannot request secret documents, classified documents about the state using FOIA. You can ask whatever is not unclassified, you know, is not.
But then they can just decide to classify everything.
Well, actually, there are specific laws for classifying stuff. But you know, in this case, everything is so unusual that when I ask for the correspondence between the Crown Prosecution, when I asked for the correspondence between the Crown Prosecution Service and the Swedish prosecutors, they provided, initially they said, we won't give you anything. Then I sued them. And at that point, I started releasing some of the correspondence with the Swedish prosecutors. And they said, this is the full correspondence. And I discovered that it was not true. That was not the full correspondence. So I went back and said, this is not the full correspondence. Please have a look on it and look for the rest of the correspondence. And they replied, we destroyed. And since then, that was in 2010, in November 2010, November 2007, November 2017, 4 years ago. Since then, I'm still fighting to discover how they destroyed what they destroyed, why, and so on, which is, as I said, is completely, you know, unbelievable. I never heard, I mean, we have many cases where this kind of things have happened in Italy, the destruction of judicial things, but these are about massive scandals about, I never heard of a case where you have a sex case, a modest sex investigation where the documents have been destroyed and they are not willing to provide clarifications on what they destroyed, when, how. This is very unbelievable, you know, very, very incredible. And you know, in my book, I thought even what happened next. And I hope it will be translated in English so that people understand how, you know, how suspicious is this case, you know?
Oh, it's more than suspicious. We know it. The game is rigged. The problem is only few there to say it. Have you had some blowback on your fight? Because as we were saying earlier, a journalist that take his head off the water then try to discover what's really happened is at risk. I think rightly, like Julian Assange. Have you had some pressure, trouble, or anything that prove this?
Well, I had some problems, like I was tailed. I was followed aggressively in an open way for intimidation purposes. I was stolen important documents in Rome while traveling from the airport to the center of the city. I had this kind of experience. At the same time, if I compare my situation to the situation of Julian Assange and the WikiLeaks journalists, it's absolutely, I mean, I was unscrew my phone inside the embassy. My conversation were recorded inside the embassy, which is a scandal, you know? It's a scandal that a journalist talked to a source and she discovered that our conversation have been filmed, had been recorded.
Can you sue for that? Can you sue anybody?
I sued them, and the case is ongoing in Spain, in Madrid, and I sued the company UC Global, which was in charge of the security of the embassy, and which was supposed to be, you know, protective of Julian Assange and everyone inside the embassy. Quite the opposite. It came out that they are under investigation for spying on him, on the lawyers, on journalists, everyone, on Julian Assange's partner and their son, and so on. So I sued them. I'm waiting for this investigation in Madrid. At the same time, I would say what I went through is nothing if you compare my situation with the situation of Julian Assange. No one ever arrested me. No one ever even questioned me. No one, nothing, you know. Everything was done to it. He was destroyed.
Yeah.
He has been destroyed.
So what would you say is the state of the media in Italy? Now we're neighbor as countries. We have some borders with you, Switzerland, Italy. In Switzerland, what do you say? I don't think they are corrupt. They are just, and I've interviewed one of the main media here, and they said, well, we don't have money to cover this kind of stuff. They don't have the resources. So basically, no one really cares because we're quite closed-minded, I think, toward the world. What would you say? Because Italy is a bigger country, maybe it's different. How does they cover this?
Well, it's true that it's a big country, but at the same time, you know, that there is a serious problem of lack of resources in journalism. There is a serious problem of ownership of media. In Italy, basically was most in the hands of oligarchs, of very rich businessmen who have massive interests. So they have conflicts of interest. They have very strong interest in having excellent relationship with powerful countries like the US, so they don't want to upset the US. So we have serious problem, you know, we have serious problem. At the same time, you don't need huge resources in order to cover this case, you know, all you have to do, if you don't want to do a FOIA litigation as I have done, which I have done alone, you know, so I cannot believe that a middle-sized newsroom cannot afford to do what I have done completely alone, looking for money here and there, paying in my personal capacity some of the legal fees for thousands and thousands of euros until I was able to cover them, because at a certain point I could not afford. I could not afford to cover it. When I arrived to 6,000 euros, I said, okay, I cannot do it because I'm not a rich person, so I cannot do it. And I look for grants. I look for grants in investigative journalism. I was lucky to get 2 grants to cover my legal fees. So I don't believe that if a journalist alone will have been doing this, a middle-sized newsroom cannot do it. You don't need, you don't need to buy, helicopters or drones or some fancy equipment in order to have a proper coverage of this case. I don't believe it. I think it is a pretext to say that there are no money, there are no resources. It is a pretext because they could do it using basic resources.
I think you're right. If only the problem was that and only that, but it's like a dynamic. You see Snowden, you see Chelsea Manning, you see Don Zinger, you see also the other Daniel Hale. All have the same problem.
Yeah.
Maybe but they are different somehow. And also like Snowden is more like he'd like to change the system from within, and Assange is more like a revolutionary. So they're all whistleblower, but they have different values maybe and strategy. But that at the end of the day, that's all the same. If you try to challenge the power, then you'll pay for it.
Absolutely. I mean, we don't have to have the same politics. Maybe we have a different politics, but we agree on some values, and the values of truth, the values of accountability, the value of being, of defending democracy, because the whole point is defending democracies. These people want to commit crimes at the highest level and do it with impunity, absolute impunity. They want to kill, they want to torture, they want to destroy entire nations.
When we say they, who are they?
Well, in this case, I refer to the documents for which Julian Assange has lost his freedom, which means the Afghan warlogs and Iraqi warlogs. And who are these people? Are the State Department, the Pentagon, the military, the US military industrial complex, and their allies, and the intelligence community, the US intelligence communities, and the intelligence services of their allies. I mean, they want complete impunity, and they don't just want impunity. They even want to destroy any possibility for the public to be exposed, because they already have impunity. Look at the case of Abu Omar in Italy, or Khaled al-Masri in Germany. These 2 people were kidnapped. Abu Omar was kidnapped in Milan in the middle of the day. Khaled al-Masri was kidnapped in the former Yugoslavia, and he was renditioned to Afghanistan. And he was innocent. He was an innocent person. He was tortured. He was sodomized, and there were no legal consequences for the CIA agents involved in all these crimes. So they had impunity,
Yeah, they do.
The same with Abu Omar. In this case, our prosecutors were fantastic. They were able to nail the CIA agents. They were able to get a final sentence. So at a certain point, they could have ended up in jail, but they didn't, because the Italian politicians refused to forward the arrest warrant to the US. So again, even if our prosecutors were fantastic, were absolutely brilliant and effective, at the end of the day, the CIA agents ended up in complete impunity, absolute impunity. So these people already have impunity.
Yeah, made me think.
They don't want to be exposed because these documents expose their crimes. So they don't want that the journalists and the public opinion look at their crimes, at their dirty secrets. You know?
Yeah, and they even want to be thanks for it. That's craziness. Make me think of the movie. I don't know if you've seen it, The Lord of War. You know, with Nicolas Cage.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. When at the end he says in 30 seconds, your superior is going to come and is going to explain that you've done a great job, and I will be gone. And that's exactly it. It's really painted the picture. But when I see that, I'm like, well, then okay, but then we're totally screwed. I'm sorry, but I don't see the escape game there, because when you look, the politics is totally corrupt, and as soon as there's one person who can actually challenge the status quo, everybody, including his colleague and the people who are supposed to help him, turn against him violently, because they are finance, they are everything. That so it's like it's a bleak image somehow also to realize that the power behind everything is so strong. And even if we win small cases, there's such a mountain to climb every time. Like, we're naming the most famous: Julian Assange, Snowden, Manning, Donziger, Hale. They are the most famous one, but the one you told about, I've never heard the names, and I'm sure there are thousands of people who just don't know the names. It's like we're fighting for the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the tip of the iceberg. At the same time, if you realize what it means that, you know, the Pentagon cannot keep its secret anymore. They lost control of and WikiLeaks was able to reveal the Afghan war logs, Iraq war logs, and the Guantanamo files. And the CIA lost control of its secrets. And the NSA lost control of its secrets because Snowden exposed them. So it might be little, you know, a drop in the ocean, you know, it might be the tip of the iceberg. At the same time, the consequences are gigantic. They cannot control their dirty secrets.
What do you think is the consequences? Because yesterday they just killed 10 civilians and no one cares. No one is going to be prosecuted. No one is going to pay anything. No one is going to even be afraid of any charge of any sort. So what would you think? Because also I think there's a change in the people's mind and the trust they give. But
absolutely.
Do you see any other positive outcome of it?
I see a positive outcome, because if you think at the chance of looking at the dirty secrets, it's it's a revolutionary. You know, it's the first step for accountability.
Yeah.
Maybe it will take 20 years or maybe 30 years, but at the same time, we have a chance to look at their dirty secrets, so they cannot hide themselves anymore. And even if the picture is bleak, as you said, there are also some lights. Look, after Chelsea Manning, there was Edward Snowden. After Edward Snowden, there was Daniel Hale. There was a reality winner. There was, you know, all these people that. So, I mean, there are some progress. And if we put pressure, if we have an informed public, we can, you know, accelerate this process. Mm-hmm. We can get this process faster and faster, because we are in the age where people are well informed. People can be well informed, information can be widespread, so we can put pressure, we can get our voice heard, we can agitate, educate, as I said. So it's, it's not just everything dark. There are also lights,
Yeah.
Otherwise, I would stop doing my work.
No, I'm sure. And I'm very grateful that you continue, and more people should be inspired. And there's also a good outcome. Like now, Chelsea Manning is free. Is she? Sorry.
Yeah, she's free.
She's free now.
We are very, very lucky that she is still. She's still.
She survived. She's a hero.
She tried to commit suicide 3 times.
Yeah, I know.
So we are very, very lucky.
She's a survivor.
Yeah, absolutely. We are
so
very
that's
lucky.
Now you can see that she can maybe start like to have a normal life again. That's.
Yeah, I mean, she's doing this. She's bright. She has a huge, she's a moral giant. You need to be a moral giant to do what she did. So, I mean, she's a moral giant. I believe she realized how people admire her, for what she has done. So I hope, I'm confident she will be able to rebuild her life.
Yeah, actually, there's a news here in Switzerland. She's going to work for a small startup, or maybe not small. I have not all the details, but in tech and protection. So she has a huge expertise. So I'm happy she's very brilliant. She's going to work here. I'm not sure she's going to come in Switzerland. If she does. That would be fantastic, but the case of Snowden, maybe something about it. Where are we at? Like he's still in Russia. That's quite ironic, I think, and shameful for.
Well, unless he used Elon Musk, solution to go into the space.
Yeah, that's.
He has to remain in Russia simply before there is no alternative at the moment. And, that's again, this tells you that whatever you think about the decision of going to Russia, he finds himself in that situation. And to these days, 8 years after, there was no other solution, there was no alternative, there was no alternative whatsoever. So people who criticize him for accepting asylum and protection from Russia, maybe they should tell us what's the alternative, what they have done.
He's already sacrificed his life. So, I mean, what do we want?
Exactly. And if anyone has any alternative to Russia, they should step out and tell us what's the alternative, what kind of solution they suggest, because I mean, these people want him dead. They won't stop at nothing, he is in danger. He has been in danger from the very beginning after revealing the NSA secrets, mass surveillance.
Yeah, a huge gift to the journal public too, right?
Absolutely,
huge. Now, I've heard about Donziger, who denounced the pollution of Chevron, I think, but I'm not sure of the details of the case. But I know he's also persecuted, and I think he's assigned to residence or something.
To be honest, I know very little about the case. I follow it on Twitter, but I'm not confident enough to comment on this case because I don't know it very
I will get him online then.
Oh, yes.
I don't know if I have that reach, to be honest. But I know that you also worked to denounce pollution, notably in Pakistan.
No, actually, that was workers' exploitation in Pakistan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because you are an investigative
and I work on another important case, and the case was the killing of an Italian aid worker by a US drone in Pakistan. It was the only drone strike where the US asked for apologize for killing a person, an innocent.
Because he had an Italian.
They never before had apologized publicly. In that case, in the case of this Italian aid worker and an American aid worker, their names were Giovanni Loporto and Warren Weinstein. In the case of this killing by a US drone, the US apologized. At that time, the US was headed by President Obama, and President Obama publicly apologized. Never ever had any apology for killing innocent civilian. So it was the first time, and they probably apologized because those were Western innocent civilian killed by a US drone strike, probably. You know, and in that case, I have been trying to investigate the killing using FOIA, using confidential sources. All I was able to do is to unearth a document, a confidential document by the US, an agreement between the US government and the family of Giovanni Loporto for a payment, €1,185,000. And it was the first time that an agreement was signed by the US government and the family of a victim by a US drone strike. The first time, there were never formal agreements between the US government and the family of the victims. So that is kind of unique document. And that was all I was able to unearth because the case is shrouded in secrecy.
Always. And what other investigative work are you doing? Because I don't think you only focus on one, but you're probably working on a lot of different injustice in the world.
Yeah, I mean,
injustice.
Well, my own expertise is in in secret documents. I have an expertise in verifying secret documents, classified documents, which is very, very difficult. But I have 11 years experience thanks to the work on the WikiLeaks documents as Snowden and so on. So it's very, it's very intense because you cannot go around asking people, can you help me to verify the secret documents by the CIA? You won't have your neck, you won't.
Hanged.
So you cannot go around asking people. So you have to find other solutions. You have to have an expertise and try to verify the documents using other solutions. I don't want to discuss how, but
of course not.
That's very interesting, So for example, when in Italy, there was a kind of scandal, which was a fake actually. There was a kind of scandal about the 5-star receiving some dirty monies from Venezuela. And
the 5-star movement, the political movement.
Yes. So there was this document published by a media in Italy, purported to be by the Venezuelan intelligence, and revealing that 5-star movements had received dirty money from Venezuela. And I immediately understood that the document was a fake, was a completely fabricated stuff. Why I understood this? Because I had a lot of experience in verifying secret documents. So I noticed some features of these documents, and I immediately said, this is a fake.
Was it signed by Juan Guaido, the other fraud? The other fake auto-proclaimed president of Venezuela?
I don't know who.
No.
I don't know who was behind it, but at the end of the day, they tried to represent the 5-star movement as corrupt, receiving black money.
Dirty games.
the documents was a fake,
A fake, yeah.
fabricated story.
And you could prove it.
I could understand it was false, the documents. Of course, I don't know whether there were any dirty money. I don't know. All I can say is that documentation is false.
And so you cannot base your understanding on it. Yeah. Okay. I agree. Yeah.
So and the reason why I was able to do it, to understand it immediately, is because I have spent 11 years verifying documents, and so I look at some features and I understand whether the document is true or whether it's genuine or whether it's not genuine.
Mm-hmm. So you must be working internationally very often, because usually the subject you're working on or treating is of like international matter.
Yes.
Or is it like more centered to Italy, or no, it's global?
No, I work on international matters. However, I also work on Italian matters and topics, of course. Of course, whenever I go on social networks like Twitter, which is the only one I use, I tend to discuss whatever it has an international dimension rather than a local dimension.
Okay. Twitter, isn't it that dangerous for a journalist to rely solely on Twitter?
Well, maybe yes. In my case, Twitter helped, I would say, because when I was followed, and it was quite of concern because it was done for intimidation purposes.
Mm-hmm.
When I was followed, I discussed this with a lawyer, and the lawyer said, you should go very public about what's happening. And of course, I used the social networks, and they stopped,
Okay.
So,
for transparency, it can help. I understand, yes, that. But sometimes we don't know about censorship, like it seems to be a trend. I've heard that a lot of Palestinian accounts has been just erased, basically.
I had followers telling me, well, I tweeted your tweet many times and it disappeared, or I lost your thread. I was unable to read your thread because it was disrupted. So whenever this happened, I make a fuss on Twitter, and I blame the Twitter and ask for Twitter support assistance, because I want to make the public aware of this problem.
And does it work?
So far, more or less, it has worked. So far,
again, the public opinion has a strength that we may underestimate.
Don't underestimate how they can be manipulated. I want to tell a story. When I was working on the Snowden files, I met a source. I was working on the Snowden files with Glenn Greenwald.
One of the finest, Glenn Greenwald.
Yeah. I was working on the Snowden files about Italy with Glenn Greenwald. And I was discussing the Snowden revelations, the publicly known Snowden revelation, with a source. And the source suddenly told me, an Italian source told me, I know that there was a private company who suggested the Italian government to manipulate the debate on Twitter about Snowden. So they went to the public, to the Italian government, proposing we can influence the debate on Snowden on Twitter and other social networks. So I asked this source, can you tell me more? Who was this private company and what the Italian government said? And he said the Italian government refused to manipulate the debate on Twitter using their technology. And they said, what kind of technology and what private company was that? And he said, I don't want to discuss this. I have I have a home in the US, and I want to be able to go back to the US and to travel to the US. So I don't want to discuss this. And the source did not discuss this, but the source explained me that there are technologies to manipulate the public debate on social networks. And at that time, during the Snowden files, there were private companies willing to provide this, to sell this technology to at least to the Italian government, which provide you an insight on how they want to manipulate the debate, how the technology can be manipulated. So you should not take at face value what you see on the social networks and how the public react to certain news, because it can be highly manipulated.
Yeah. The risk to me, though, is that they create clusters where what we share now is only shared in a closed bubble of people who tend to believe that or to have understood that already.
Exactly.
And not being able to reach further than this bubble. That's I think a way for them to cement to limit the possibility to inform the larger people,
the public.
I have no proof of that, but it's kind of a feeling. And the algorithm, they tend to do that anyway, like to polarize and to feed you what you already know anyway. So people should actually follow people that they don't agree with. Maybe it will help open some lines. So what journalist or media do you think is highly trustable and puts enough resources, time, and energy to uncover what we discussed earlier? You've said in USA there's Glenn Greenwald, obviously. I think it's a huge
Glenn
figure.
Greenwald. I mean, I usually read journalists rather than newspapers.
Okay, yeah, that's very interesting.
Journalists, of course. So, I look at how, whenever I read an investigation on certain matters, I look at their sourcing, whether they use anonymous sources, whether they don't use an anonymous, whether they provide some documentation to support their investigation. So it's, I believe that it's really important to look for these things.
Yeah. Do you have names of journalists of that quality beside for Glenn Greenwald? I know John Pilger. John Pilger, to me, is the father of all the brave investigative journalists. He's a monster of journalism. It's huge and very generous, because all the work he's done many documentaries that you can actually watch for free on internet.
Yes.
And I've learned a lot about the world because of him. So that's great. That show what power can have someone who really pursue the truth for the truth,
Exactly.
And these people will be remembered for history. They will have a name. I mean, to me, it's a giant.
Yeah.
Do you have other names, other journalists, or maybe not journalists? In USA, there's Jimmy Dore. I love him. He talks with his heart. He's not a journalist. He's a comedian, I think, but he's like, I mean, he says things that like they are. That's amazing. So you can go to different sources, I guess. But do you have any?
I also look at newsletters. I enjoy newsletters from people who are highly technical people, and many of them just are visionaries, so they can imagine the future. They can discuss. Sometimes I understand just the tip of the iceberg of their highly technical arguments, highly technical newsletters, and so on. But even that tip of the iceberg is very interesting for me, because it helped me to understand what is going to happen. Look, for example, at the Cypherpunk newsletter. That was amazing. They were, you know, the cypherpunk newsletter, which Julian Assange was following back, was contributing back in the 90s. They had introduced, they had imagined the cryptocurrency. They had imagined anonymous communications. So they had a vision of the future. So it's highly stimulating, I believe. Most of the time, I don't understand, technically speaking, what they say. Sometimes I get some concept, other times, but I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a great way also to try to look 2 steps ahead, like pioneer, like Assange and others. Yeah,
absolutely, highly technical, highly specific, but still stimulating.
Yeah, great. We usually ask because we have many guests on that podcast, and what is the driver for your action and work? Because we all know that you're not rich, because, or maybe you are, actually don't know, but if you are, it's probably not because you are asking for FOIA or something for stuff like that.
That's
maybe for
other reason, but what drives me?
Yeah, what drives you?
I believe in what I'm doing. I believe in the strength of journalism. I believe in the power of journalism, and I believe journalism is it's about exposing the most powerful. And one of the most powerful entities is what I call the secret power, the power of, which uses state secrecy to shield criminality, criminality at the highest level.
Is that the deep state, for instance?
Well, the deep state in these days is a very abused term for all sorts of conspiracy. So I want to avoid that. I call it the secret state, the secret power, which is the power shielded by state secrecy. And this state secrecy, doesn't protect the security of citizens, but rather it protects the powerful from having their crimes exposed. It prevents the public opinion to learn what they are doing in the dark when they are not under scrutiny by the press, by the public opinion.
Yeah. So I understand.
I really believe. I don't know. I'm a mathematician, so the visible power is not really interested to me. I know that people are very interested in. It's the right thing to investigate the visible power. It is the power which is in charge of your pensions, your health service, your universities and schools. Is the politician whom you can see on the talk shows, on the print edition of your newspaper. That's important case. It's really important to have an oversight of this visible power. However, as a mathematician, I'm much more interested in what is not visible, because I have always been dealing with invisible concepts. And secret power is invisible. They shield themselves. These people shield themselves with secrecy. And behind these curtains of secrecy, they do commit crimes. Most of the time, horrific crimes, like planning the destructions of entire nations, like the Iraq War, or war crimes in Afghanistan, or
with hundreds of thousands of civilian.
Exactly. So this secret power, with this secret power, you don't have, it's very, very difficult to know what they are doing, because everything is shrouded in secrecy. But I find it extremely important to have an oversight and to have accountability. So how to address it, how to do it. And that's why I'm really motivated in working on the secret documents, on the WikiLeaks documents, because it allows to have an insight on the secret documents. It opened a gaping hole in the secrecy. For the first time, they opened a gaping hole in the secrecy. Never before in human history. Of course, there were some whistleblowers like Daniel Ellsberg. He is one of my heroes, He did it. He revealed the Pentagon Papers, but he did just one. WikiLeaks, establish a method for doing it systematically. That's very valuable, really important. For the first time, the secret power feel threatened because their dirty secrets get exposed. That's why they want him dead. They want to have him destroyed. Him and WikiLeaks, they want to destroy it. Because if they destroy it, they just don't stop a whistleblower. They send a message to everyone, That's why they want to destroy it. So I'm really motivated to go ahead with this work because I find this secret power tremendously important, It's the power that decide that you stay in Afghanistan 20 years when you don't have the money to have decent schools. You don't have the money to have decent pensions. You don't have the money to have decent hospitals, Yeah. So I'm very, very interested in this invisible secret power, which is rational. It's not like, the kind of other sects or other, it's a rational power in a sense. So you can analyze it using rationality, using understanding secrecy, understanding how classified documents works, and so on.
Yeah, that's such a task, a huge task. And I think you're reaching to the top of the power, but somehow I think the way you describe your work should be the same for every journalist at any level. Is like to be the fourth balance of power, to critique, to understand, to inform, to go in depth, to really
not trust the power, trust the power. Don't believe anything until it is officially denied.
It seems to be lost, though. It seems to be lost when you think, because it's didn't they teach you that at school at first? Because look at the media. For 20 years, they took the paper from the States and they just published it like this.
Yeah.
Still this morning, I saw that in the media. I take screenshots. So one day I'm going to face them up, I think, and show them, why do you just repeat what others says? It's not your job to do that.
Yeah.
So I think at every level, journalism should be perceived as you perceive it, but somehow it's lost in translation. I don't know why.
I mean, there is less and less critical approach. There is less and less critical reporting. That's the problem, because there is, as I said, there are the biggest part of our media are in the hands of oligarchs, very rich people, and they just forward their own interest.
Yeah.
So the journalists understand that they have to be very careful, because there are very, very few positions in the media industry. So there are very few positions, and so they can lose their job very, very easily. So there is less and less critical reporting, critical investigative journalism, which is a disaster.
Let's hope that it's more curious, because when you really want to know something, then you very quickly notice that the media who are supposed to give you the information are not able to. And now with one click or two, you can have a second, a third, a fourth point of view, which make the situation clearer.
Yeah.
And now you understand that the first source, the one who is supposed to be the most credible one, is bollock. It's just behind any resemblance to the reality. And so these people who owns these newspapers and stuff to read them after all. So I don't know if they have so much money that they can spend on nothing forever, but well, I don't see that as a sustainable business plan.
Well, these people have rich people who owns these newspapers and TV and so on, so they can afford to lose money. Otherwise, they wouldn't stay in this business. So clearly, they are willing to lose money, and clearly, losing money is worth for them because they still buy newspapers, they still buy TV and so on. So they want to go ahead with buying influence. They want to buy influence, and money buy influence. We know that money always buy influence. So. But I'm not so pessimistic, as I said, because I see a lot of people, young people who want to, want a different journalism, want in-depth information, they want to inform themselves, and they want a critical approach. So I'm not so pessimistic about this. Yeah. Of course, the big business, the big, interest, control the mainstream narrative, but still there are cracks in this system.
And bigger cracks. So exactly. I'm sure of one thing: if people are still listening now, they really want to know things in depth, and because of you, I think they know a little bit better. So thank you very much for this interview, this conversation we had together. Maybe there's a subject you wish to share that we didn't discuss, and maybe this room here. So if you like.
I want to use this conversation in order to make people understand how urgent to step out and to call for the liberation of Julian Assange, because his life is online. He can be extradited. He seriously risks, and he must be free because he cannot survive this indefinite detention inside the Belmarsh prison. I want that people realize how serious is the situation and to focus on it, because it's a matter of life or death,
Absolutely.
There is a very, very serious risk that he cannot survive and to be mentally fine due to this perpetual,
1000% agree. So we should be vocal. We should put pressure on everybody. We should inform. We should organize, as you said. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people at Belmarsh in end of October. I'll try my best to see if I can be there or organize somehow. And we all do that. And finger crossed, one day Julian will be free, and the soonest, the better.
Absolutely, he must be free. I mean, we must, as I said in many times, we must win this case.
Absolutely,
because if we lose it, the consequences will be gigantic. It will be huge,
No, devastating.
Both for him as a human being, first of all, because let's not forget that before being
as a man, as a father, as a husband, as a human being,
before being a symbol being,
That's true.
So first of all, for him as a human being, but also for all of us, because as I said, if you cannot reveal war crimes and torture, in a democracy,
then
the end of democracy, there is no democracy.
Thank you, Stefania Maurizi, for your time, for your expertise, for your clarity, for your integrity. We really appreciate it. You're welcome anytime here if you want to share something. And good luck for the rest. We'll probably see each other here or there.
Thanks so much. Thank
Bye.
you for your interest.
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.